has 100 sheep and loses one of them? Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country, go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and his neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need to repent. Or, suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of angels of God over one sinner who repents. Jesus continued. Then there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So the father divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had. He set off for a distant country and there squandered his wealth in wild living. And after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. The son longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. And when he came to his senses, or when he became desperate enough, is maybe another way to say that, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here, I'm starving to death. I will set out. I will go back to my father. I'll say to him, "Father, I've sinned against you, heaven, and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." So he got up. He went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. His father was filled with compassion for him. His father ran to his son. His father threw his arms around him, and his father kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe, put it on him." And the father said, "Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet." And the father said, "Bring the fattened calf and kill it." And the father said, "Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And so they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. And when he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. And so he called one of the servants and he asked him, "What's going on?" Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." And the older brother became so angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you, and I've never disobeyed your orders, yet you never even gave me a younger goat so I could celebrate with my friends. And when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me. Everything I have is yours." But we had to celebrate. We had to be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. It was a good party. Our father and neighbors say they hadn't seen my father happy, that happy, for a very, very long time. That whole evening, I continued to be overwhelmed by my father's undying love for me. Like, why? How? I had not just rebelled against him. I had not just taken his money. I had, in doing what I did, said, I want you dead. You are as good as dead. You do not exist to me. Give me what I'm going to get when you die now. There was no stronger way I could have spoken to him. No stronger way I could have told him, to do whatever we word might say today when we want someone out of our lives, out of the picture, when we absolutely hate someone. I had wished him dead. I hadn't wanted to return as his son. I just wanted to be his hired labor. That way I could still have my freedom. I could still do what I wanted and at least have some food to eat. But his response in my returning blew that plan to pieces. His excitement and then his compassion. Upon seeing me. The fact that he publicly declared his love, his forgiveness, his acceptance of me. Not in private, not just with the family, but with the whole community. This act finally reached into my selfish, hardened, love-starved heart. He had told me that he had loved me. He had shown he had loved me, but I didn't want to hear it back then. I thought he was just a useless, irrelevant old guy. Now his words came to life. His words of love. His words of care. You know, he put his own reputation on the line because he would not even allow his community, the community that he lived in, to justly ridicule and abuse me. In fact, he ran right through the crowd. You see, when someone comes home, when someone like me comes back, the people come out not to see a spectacle, not to wonder what should happen, or will happen, I should say. But they come out to help bring justice, to help show what needs to be done to this wayward child. In other words, they were going to stand on the side of the road and help my dad teach me a lesson. And instead, my dad walked through their gauntlets. Not walked, he ran. That someone would love me so completely, even when I had so utterly rejected him, was unbelievable. And as he ran through that crowd to me, while I was still off, my heart melted. His deep love for me broke through, and no words were needed because his words were encased in his actions. And I just rested in his arms. My feeble plan to save myself melted in the arms of my Father. I was finally home. This place that had been such a bane to me, such a pain to me, such a boring place, now became a place where I belonged, where I could rest, where I could thrive. But that wasn't the end. He ordered that I be clothed in his best robe. Me, filthy, stinky, reeking, unbathed. And he says, it's okay. Put my best robe, what I have, I want it on him. He wanted my shame to be covered by his clothing. And then he said that I be given the family ring. And thus, with that act, I was given complete right and authority as his child. Then he said, new sandals to be brought to my bruised and weary feet. And then he said, listen, that fattened cow that we're saving for a really special event, let's kill it and put it on the barbecue. Because we're going to have a party. This was the reception for a hero. This was the reception for a son who had made his father proud. Not for a loser. Not for a son who had wished and who had declared, you are dead, Father. At the party, where I was just as kind of taking it all in as were the people in the community, they told me, well, I guess this sort of makes sense because do you know what your dad did every day? Every day he woke up and he'd walk to the edge of the community, to the town, and he'd look in the distance. And he'd just stand and look and be looking. We all thought it was strange until we realized he was looking for you, hoping for you to return. It also, my community told me they got tired of Dad talking about me all the time, of yearning for the day when I would return. And he continued to speak of his love for me. And they'd say, what? This guy who wished you dead, you care two bits about him? Just shake the dust off your feet and forget about him. Get on with your life. He's not worth it. Still, Dad refused to give up hope that I would come home. The community all tried to talk sense into him. Like, let's be practical about this. He's gone. Be glad he's gone. In fact, After what he did to you, why don't you go send someone to take care of him once and for all? Don't waste another moment on that boy. He just isn't worth it. Be thankful that you have a son left who is a hard worker. In fact, where is he now? Oh, he's in the field. Right, yes, because he is a hard worker. To which the father said, yeah, and I wish you'd come in. I wish you could celebrate with me. Now, I found out that the reason Dad had seen me coming home from a long way off was because ever since I'd left home, he had been daily looking out for me and hoping for my return. And he began each day praying that I would return. And he ended each day praying that I would be kept safe. And when he was out in the field, he would often look lovingly in the direction I had left. And when he sat with the elders at the gate of the town, as was customary to do, and they would sit there and they would talk about the issues and the decisions to be made, and they often had to get his attention, because he'd often be seen looking into the distance, looking, hoping for his son. My dad did not waver in his love for me and his persistent hope that I would return home. Needless to say, from that day on, I saw Dad in a different light. It wasn't that he had changed. Rather, it was that I had. His voice that before had been such a burden became alive now that I understood his love for me. And instructions from my dad that I once resisted and rebelled against and thought were stupid and life-sucking, I now understood and experienced as good and life-giving. It wasn't always easy. There were many times where I found myself wanting to run away from Dad again, I should say. And of course, that's because I had come from a different way of living. And there was a transformation that needed to happen over time. And sometimes it was my restless spirit to experience the world beyond home again. Sometimes it was to taste the forbidden fruit just one more time. Other times it was because I found myself doing things on my own, ignoring Dad's advice, thinking that I was pretty good and could do a better job than what his words were to me. You have to understand something. Dad did things a lot differently than other people. And often his ways seemed foolish and costly and painfully slow and unwise. While other people were coming up with the latest and the greatest cost-effective way to produce results, Dad insisted that his way be followed. Of course, if it weren't for his way, I would be dead by now. I mean, it was Dad's way that gave me my inheritance when everyone else thought he should just give me 40 lashes and send me back into the field. But what Dad saw that everyone didn't was that Dad didn't want a slave, but he wanted a son. He wanted a child. And if my heart wasn't at home with him, that I then needed to be set free. For he didn't just want a son who bore his name, he wanted a son who bore his heart. And so his crazy love for me set me free in hope that I might really return. It was also Dad's way to grieve over my leaving home. Everyone else wanted him to get angry, to get even, but Dad would often well up in tears over my wayward rebellion and the distorted way of living that the world beyond home offered. He knew the pain and sorrow that sin was inflicting on my body and my soul, and in his grieving, he bore the pain that my rebellion caused. Both his and mine. And he took it and he turned it into prayer. It was that grieving that enabled Dad to never give up, to never give up hope that I would return, even when the community tried hard to convince him that I wasn't worth the time of day. Hope was his way. Day in, day out. It was also his way that caused him to be filled with compassion as he saw me coming from a distance. Day in, day out, of hoping, of yearning, of praying, of trusting. Everyone else wanted to give me my just deserts, to ridicule, to mock, to beat, to humiliate, to teach me a lesson for how I humiliated and scorned my dad. And instead, Dad would have none of it. As I said, he ran through the crowd. He ran through the gauntlet that was meant for me. And with tears, he kissed me. And as he came back through the gauntlet with me, he was there as my protector against those who would condemn me. Which brings me to the most amazing thing. It was Dad's way to forgive. Everyone else would have never allowed me to forget what I did to Dad. They would have made me work as a slave to repay it. It would have hung around like a millstone around my neck every day of my life, dragging me down, making me feel small, unworthy. The rest of my life. But not Dad. He wanted nothing less than full sonship. The robe, the ring, the shoes. He wanted me to be his child. And to emphasize that, it was Dad's way to celebrate my return. Others would have tried to hide me in the closets. Yeah, he's here, but we're trying to keep him hidden because we really don't want anyone to know. He's kind of a disgrace to us. Others would have wanted him to keep his black sheep hidden in the closet. Or they would have been cynical. He's here to fleece his sucker of an old man again. But not Dad. Joy was his choice. A party must be thrown. There was a public event where everyone was invited, where the biggest, the fattest, the juiciest calf was roasted and served to all. Unbelievable. It was such a huge risk. After all, I was unproven. Had I really changed? Could I really change? And it was Dad's way to be generous. Dad drove our accountant crazy with his generosity, not to mention my brother. And when I so rudely and arrogantly demanded my inheritance from Dad, well, anyone else would have kicked me on the street with no money. But Dad actually gave me all my inheritance, knowing full well that I would probably go and blow all his hard work. Blow it all. And that is what I did. And there were hours where Dad had spent thinking, hoping, and praying for my return. Time that had been spent could have been doing other more profitable things. Get over it! Get over it! Get over him! He's gone. Forget about him. There's more to life. But in Dad's economy, profitable meant living a life of love, a life of mercy and forgiveness. Profitable meant having family, community. Of having that one lost sheep with him. People were more valuable than being efficient. And then there's Dad's generosity when I returned. Nothing but the best for me. Nothing but the best for me. His loser of a son. And what about the plea by my dad to my brother? My brother who was angry that I had come home, that I should be honored. His response, of course, made sense, but my dad, again, did things his way. And so when when my brother confronted my dad about how he could treat me the way he was with such specialness, my dad just simply said, "My dear son, my dear elder son, all that I have is yours. When I divided the inheritance, I gave you, your younger brother, his half, and I gave you your half. What have you been doing what I gave you?" Dad had blessed my brother with everything. If only he would receive and he would enjoy it. And then there was the generosity of Dad restoring me to full sonship. No debt to pay. No penance to be made.
There's another one here.
Dad bore the full cost of my
Oh,
rebellion.
don't watch it there.
The full cost of my rebellion. Truth is, while Dad's way may seem foolish, while Dad's way may cost a lot of money and time and pain, it may be risky and is often lonely, it is the best way, and it is the only way in this sin-cursed world. Open-handed living, tear-filled prayer, persistent hope, compassion, complete forgiveness, joy, celebration, and costly generosity. And all because of my dad's love for me. I'm increasingly allowing Dad's way to shape my thoughts and my words and my actions. All that I am and all that I hope to be, my ambitions, my hopes and dreams, I surrender these into your hands. I am becoming like my Father. I am growing up like Father, like Son. Prodigal. To be honest with you, I hadn't even looked up the word to see what it meant. I just assumed that it was something bad. It is actually a neutral word. In other words, it is a word, it is the actions, I should say, attached to the word that determine whether it is used to describe something bad or something good. The Oxford Dictionary defines prodigal as spending money or using resources freely and recklessly, wastefully extravagant. Dictionary.com defines prodigal as giving or yielding lavishly. The prodigal son definitely lived up to the word in the negative, life-sucking sense, blowing his money on wine, women, and song, as we say. But there was another prodigal who was even more a prodigal, but in a good and a life-giving way. A prodigal who was wastefully extravagant, who freely and recklessly and lavishly gave and yielded himself to his Father and to us. Emmanuel, God with us. As Philippians 2 says, Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. And being made in human likeness, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. As Henry Nouwen writes, he left the house of his heavenly Father. He came to a foreign country. He gave away all that he had and returned through a cross to his Father's home. And all of this he did not as a rebellious son, but as the obedient son, sent out to bring home all the lost children of God. Jesus is the prodigal son of the prodigal father who gave away everything the Father had entrusted to him so that I could become like him and return with him to his Father's home. Our Father, who art in heaven. Our prodigal father, who freely and extravagantly gave us his Son. Our prodigal Jesus, who freely and extravagantly and lavishly yielded his life for us. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. Jesus started his ministry by quoting from Isaiah 61, I should say. He stood up and he spoke these words. He said, "The Spirit of the Lord, the sovereign Lord, is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to put on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, and the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. And they will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor." Do you hear that? In these words from Isaiah, spoken hundreds of years before Jesus, they speak of us who are poor and needy, being dressed in the words, the life-giving words and life of God, of Jesus Christ. For we are prodigals. Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted. And this morning, God, our Father, the faithful one, the good one, the merciful one, the just one, he invites us to come home, you to come home, whether you were the wayward prodigal or the self-righteous elder son, to come home. Newman writes, God rejoices not because of the problems of the world have been solved, not because of all the human pain and the suffering have come to an end, nor because thousands of people have been converted and are now praising him for his goodness. No, God rejoices because one of his children who was lost has been found. I'm going to invite Rick to come, and we're going to sing songs of response, of declaration. And I invite you as you sing, as you listen, I want to invite you to remain seated for these songs. I want to invite you, where are you at? Are you at home with God the Father? If not, I invite you to come through Jesus Christ, come to him. As the first song says, the Father's love, how vast beyond all measure. Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest.